you can find me at redwritesbooks.com. That's red the color, writesbooks.com. And with me today, I'm gonna let you go ahead and introduce yourself and let everybody know where they can find you and what it is that you write.
Yeah, sure. I'm Justin Rose. I write high fantasy. You can find my books on Amazon, or you can find me on most social medias, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads.
I'm Dennis Vogan. I'm a writer and an artist. I have my own website, dennisvogan.com, and I'm on most social media too, under the same name, Dennis Vogan.
So we're going to talk about playing in other worlds. So really, what I want to talk about first is what that means. So when I think about playing in other worlds, it can be like fan fiction, and it can also be doing cross-genre stuff. So when you think about it, we'll start with you, Dennis, down at the end there. What does it mean to you to be playing in different worlds when it comes to writing?
So for me, it's genre. I don't write a lot of, or really any fan fiction, but I have a lot of friends who are really into fan fiction. So I almost came here to learn some things. But I do play around with a lot of genres. Sometimes I pick the genre, and sometimes the genre picks me. And so I think that's really fun. So for example, with Cold World, this is it's a sci-fi book, but it's really about spirituality and loss and grief. I lost my mom a few years ago, and I wanted to write something with fiction to kind of talk about those feelings. And for me, it kind of felt like living on a planet that was cold forever. So in Cold World, it's 200 years in the future, and the world has one season, winter. And so right there, the metaphor for me became real, and I decided to make that into science fiction. And so I didn't it wasn't a conscious thing that I did right away, but it was something that allowed me to kind of play in that other world.
So I happen to know this book, great book, I recommend it to all of you. And you did something unique that was a genre blend within the book. Do you want to tell some of our guests, what did you do? Why did you make that decision?
Yeah,
and how did it work?
So I'm not content in just picking a genre and going, that's it. There are multiple acts in this book where two of the characters, it's written like a play. And so I knew I had a lot of dialogue to deliver, and that can be kind of tough and clunky when you're just writing in normal text. And so I decided the main character, Caliph, and his father have a bunch of kind of spiritual debates. And so I framed them like plays. And so when you get to them, it says Act 1, Act 2, and then it goes back into the regular text. And so as someone, I'd written plays before and stuff, so it wasn't like my first foray into playwriting, but I thought it'd be really fun to mix playwriting with sci-fi, because why not? And yeah, I think it came out pretty well.
It was a really neat creative choice, and I think as readers sometimes we just like to just see something different, and I applaud that choice. It was really cool. Justin, what does playing in different worlds mean for you as a writer?
Yeah, so my actual published works mostly just focus on the one style, the one genre, but I enjoyed reading a lot of different works that are worked on by multiple authors. There's the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan and finished by Brandon Sanderson is a series I really, really liked, read multiple times. And my favorite part is watching the transition between the two authors as the baton is passed from the creator to the successor, who not only finishes writing the works and adds his own voice and style to it, but also pays up for all the promises that Jordan had made throughout the series and really paid homage to the original author. And I really liked kind of the mutual respect that went on there. And then a lot of properties, I enjoy Batman comics and Spider-Man comics, things that are worked on by multiple authors across time with kind of a set list pattern that they kind of adhere to, and then break in subtle ways for effect, but always kind of come back to and respect the original intent. So yeah.
So I'm gonna talk about that respecting the original intent kind of piece. So at what point, and there's a lot, do we have anybody in here who plays in legit fan fiction? That's the world that you want to write in. So what is it that what world are you writing in?
Well, it's not so much fan fiction. I am a game master. I play in the world of Exandria.
Okay. And a lot of the games, they lend themselves to stories. You'll find that tons of high fantasy in particular, it originated in games. It originated from campaigns. And so I'm gonna specifically, whether it's this world that you're playing in, or it's, in a lot of cases, there's whole big fandoms like the Star Wars franchise and the Star Trek franchise, and there's even a lot of stuff that's in like the newest Airbender, and there's a lot of things that are in the anime and manga world where people are writing their own characters to go on expeditions, campaigns, journeys in these different worlds. So what do you guys think about that? Where is that line between playing in another person's world and appropriating it? So I'll let you start that one, Justin.
I mean, I think like obviously licensing is gonna like just the legalese is gonna come into for a big part. But like if you're just talking about somebody doing it for enjoyment, and for pleasure, and for sharing it out, not like commercially pirating it, then I think the lines you're gonna have to draw are gonna be along the lines of, am I doing this because I admire the original work, or am I doing it because I want to alter the original work? And if you're doing it out of a place of admiration, if you're like, I love what this person created, I want to add to it and beautify it, then you're going to naturally be led along a course that like is in step with the author's original intent. If you approach it with, well, I didn't like this, I want to change that, so I'm going to create a version where it follows a different pattern, you're no longer engaged in an active creation, you're engaged in an active destruction because you're removing what was created by someone else. There's a line from a famous poem, Had I the Heavenly Broidered Cloths, that was, I have spread my dreams beneath your feet, tread carefully for you tread on my dreams. And writing is dreams. If you read like Neil Gaiman's Sandman stories, there's huge allegories there about how like Cain and Abel are the masters of this library of stories, and that's what the world of dreams is the world of stories. And so like the idea of walking on another person's story, you're literally walking on their dreams. And so I think that's kind of the key, is just making sure that when you enter another person's dreams, you're conscious of what their soul is and what they've poured into that,
Oh, that was beautifully put. Thank you. Do you have anything to add for that?
So I talked to some people. I did a writing class on Wednesday, and some people in that class do fan fiction, and I was very curious. So I asked them kind of why, and they said because it's so hard to think of original characters. And so for them, using other people's characters who they know well is an easier way to start writing their story than coming up with characters whole cloth. And so to go with your metaphor of destroying them, these people destroy these characters in order to make new characters, but they have to start somewhere. And so that's how they start. And so I thought that was really interesting. I was like, oh yeah, I totally get it. Like, it is a pain in the ass to invent new characters. And most of the time you don't even know who your characters are until you get to the end of something, and then you have to go back and you're rewriting and you're like, oh no, he would never do this or she would never do that. So to hear that that's how they approached fan fiction was kind of eye-opening to me, because I always thought it was like taking action figures and doing this, and I'm gonna make these two kiss, and that's how it worked. But they're legitimate writers, and they wanted a place to start, and I thought that was really cool. So
It is. It's a really good creative tool, and I will tell you, I'm somebody who's done like a complete 180 on my belief around fan fiction. So I, as an early writer, and I've been doing this for more years than I care to admit, but as an early writer, I was like, that's BS. Like, how can somebody else, like, they didn't write that world and they didn't write that. That's not they're not doing the work. And younger, pettier, scarcity mindset me would get upset even when I was seeing that stuff out there. But then when I transitioned to genre fiction, so I have a lot of seasons of my career, and I transitioned to sci-fi, which is what I write now. And it's a series that covers like 1,000 years. But the books don't cover every detail of those 1,000 years. And I thought it is just, to me, it's like the greatest honor if I have somebody who's like, yeah, I want to play in your world. Yeah, cool. That means you're like, you love my world enough to play in it. So I've come so far with this that actually the canon stories, the short stories that are going with my sci-fi are going to be fan created.
Oh.
So already like accepting people to like share their stories, like, oh, this mentioned this little thing that's just a little teeny piece of history. That for me, I'm like, oh no, I want to read about that. That's cool. Yeah, you want to write that? Cool, because I don't have time to write that. And to me, it's an honor that other people want to play in my world. But yeah, it's been a 180 for me. I used to be like really like belligerent and uninformed is what I was, uninformed. So all right, so going beyond the fan fiction piece. So let's talk about, because the multi-genre thing. Dennis, I'll start with you on this because you are a multi-genre author. Do you find certain challenges that get in your way when you're, for instance, going from something very deep and emotional like Cold World to something like The Weirdos? Or one of your other books, or maybe one of your graphic novels that's a little bit, more of a humor,
Like
element.
changing gears.
Yeah.
Well, I think that even when I'm injecting like the humor or the color, like the emotional core is always there,
Mhm.
and so that never really changes. And so yeah, the gears might change a little bit, especially when I'm doing art and stuff. But generally, the emotional core is there, so I don't really feel. I don't know. That's the thing with genre for me. Like it's more of like clothing. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Mhm.
like the characters exist in every single kind of work there is, but it's the clothing that you put on them. It's their setting, and so that never really changes for me. I'm mad that you mentioned comics earlier because I actually wrote a superhero book. So you're like talking about Batman and Spider-Man. I'm like, I should have said that. Yeah, I'm really into superheroes, and that's why one of the reasons I started the Weirdos was to create a world that was starting from scratch so other people could play it. And so I've talked to my other comic friends and stuff. I was like, hey, this is a brand new story. It's got 4 new characters. This is like 1962 Spider-Man. Do you know what I mean? So you can go anywhere with this. And so I've had friends kind of look and have ideas for what they could do there.
Very cool.
Good idea.
So, Justin, you have a lot of history that you inject into your fantasy. And so, do you ever find yourself looking to like texts that are not your genre, that are like that nonfiction text, or that are something that's a completely different genre to inspire the worlds that you are creating?
Absolutely. Like I particularly like to look to mythology and world religions. So like Joseph Campbell was a professor from like the 70s, 80s, 90s, I think. And he wrote a book called Hero with a Thousand Faces, which is like the template of the hero's journey that's now like talked about in a lot of literature criticism and stuff. And he also wrote a lot of essays and other books about like tribal rituals and different like important social dynamics between tribes and peoples and stuff. And I really like to get a lot of inspiration from there. Like one of my stories is a hero's journey that like breaks down because there's a 17-step process, and the 15th step is basically integration. It's basically the development of a persona that is able to incorporate what was learned in the world of fantastic and apply it to the world of the physical. And so like I was like, well, what happens if a hero succeeds in every physical, material way possible? He goes out, he overcomes temptation, he gains the elixir, he returns home, but he doesn't integrate. He doesn't take ownership of the psychological impact. And so I wrote a story that was a hero's journey that grew corrupted, and then I wrote a hero's regression right after. So yeah.
Okay, that's like super cool. I just want, now, I'm just here to get story ideas and very apparently, because that's super exciting. So, especially, Dennis, you were talking about how you have this emotional core that's infused into all of the things that you write, no matter what, regardless of whether it's, a sci-fi or a graphic novel. Are there though certain, rules of the rules of the road? Are there certain tropes? Are there certain expectations that you feel that regardless of what world you're playing in, okay, well, I need to still adhere to these rules of the graphic novel world, or I need to adhere to these rules of the sci-fi world?
What's really funny is now that you're saying that, I realize what I do is when I pick the genre, I think of like the biggest like rules that people tend to think of in that genre, and then I break them every time. So The Weirdos is a good example because I always tell people when I was to pick it up, I'm like, most superhero books, they end with everyone punching each other, but in this book, it ends with everyone connecting to one another because that's how I got through my shit. And so people are like, oh, so they don't actually fight? I'm like, no. And like, what kind of superhero book is that? And so I know what the rules are in the genre, and then I go, I'm gonna do something different. But I still call it the genre, so I don't know how that works. I don't know if it does work, but for me, I don't know. That's just the way that I roll, I guess.
That's the way you go. So Justin, how do you, you've talked a lot, and for those that were in the first session and got to hear a lot of your inspiration and your research that you conduct as well. So you've got a lot of these historical elements that you bring into your book. How do you then tweak it, add your own voice, and make this thing that's a piece of just historical research? How do you turn that into fiction? How do you genre bend that to make it work into your stories?
Yeah, so like I think the main thing is to ask myself like, why does my story need this element, and why does this element need what my story brings? So like if I'm writing something, and this is especially true also of working in other works like we were talking about earlier, if you're approaching something and saying, I want to insert this into my story, I want to insert a story into this, you need to ask yourself, why does it need what I bring, and why do I need what it brings? So like a lot of genres have set rules and patterns that are very useful that can be manipulated that the audience takes at face value. There are things going into a story in a different genre or in a different intellectual property that are the ground rules that the reader already has. And it can form a substrata for you to go, okay, well, I need that substrata. I need them to already have this understanding, and that will elevate me to the point where I can reach this more intricate point that I want to make. And so, yeah, those two questions really.
So you use that existing foundation to
Yeah.
like build upon it, instead of having to, almost like fan fiction, like I don't have to build this, that
Yeah.
structure's already there.
Like he said, he created this graphic novel from the ground up, so he's creating this substrata, this platform that other people can add on to and write so that they can reach more intricate points, but they already have the substrata. And that's what's so nice about working in other genres or working in other worlds, is that you can go, okay, they already know X, Y, and Z. They already have a platform to stand on that I don't have to build in every single book I write then.
Sure.
I can use it to create something more intricate.
Very cool. I want to talk about characters, because how many of you have ever, like, you watch like a program and you're like, that character, that is the character I want in my story. Like, and obviously you're maybe not taking that character. You've got a whole bunch, so much nodding around the room. So I want to talk about when you see that character, either you've read about them, maybe you've seen them in a movie or watched them on a television show, maybe they're a YouTube star, whatever it is, you see that character and you're like, this is my character. How do you take that already written, already existing character that's not in your world and pull them into your world and make them your own? And this could apply in other areas, but we're going to start with character. I have some other fun things to ask about this. And Justin, I'll let you start this one.
Yeah, so like, if you're looking to adopt a character into your own work or type, like again, we've talked about the shared substrata, shared groundwork, if you have a rule, that gives you a chance to play with what means more to you. So you would take the character and you say like, Batman, Batman doesn't kill. That's like rule number one. Batman doesn't, but he's also a very gritty character. He's not Superman. Superman is like the integrated superego and ego together. He's the perfect model of morality and justice. Superman is the struggling mortal, the shattered ego, the shattered superego, who's kind of like striving towards something better. So you go, okay, well, I want a perfect hero. I'll write about somebody like Superman, where I can have this integrated ideal figure, or I'll write about somebody like Batman, where I can have the shattered, broken elements striving towards something higher, but you take the rules that are laid down and you only break them if you have payoff. So like the best, or the most recent, second most recent adaptation of Superman was Henry Cavill's version, and he kills Zod in the first movie. And it's like one of the biggest criticized things in superhero movies recently, because Superman doesn't kill, and in this, early movie in this series, he kills the villain. And it's like, what that shows is that they didn't have enough payout to break the rule. Because there are other examples where those same rules are broken in the comics or in other movies, and it's just lauded and it's beautiful because you had a payoff. And so that's the thing, you need to figure out what the rules are and get a payoff for your
On
brain.
shot first, that sort of thing. So, no, I love that. What about you, Dennis? What do you do if you want to pull a character in?
Well, I'm gonna slingshot all what you just said, and I think that you can take a character that's pretty well known, and you can give them attributes that maybe they wouldn't have, and if you do it right, they can be a brand new character. So to go off your Superman thing, Homelander from The Boys is a great example
yes,
of what happens if you
totally.
take Superman and you make him a dick. You just make him like the worst dude in the world. And the thing is, they do such a great job with that character that you don't even think of him as a Superman analogy anymore, really. Homelander's his own character now. And so if we think of Homelander, he's his own guy. He's not a Superman ripoff anymore, because they did that well.
Yeah, very good. That's excellent.
When you said that, I was like, oh, that's perfect.
They gave you payoff.
Exactly.
He's a completed, absolutely interesting character because they give you payoff for that.
And they have a universe that goes on so long, you really get to see his day-to-day life. It's not an episode, it's not an issue. It's like, this is what Superman would be like all the time if he was a dick. And yeah, they do a great job with it.
And honestly, I'm gonna play up. You said you're a game master,
Yes.
and when you were talking about Batman and Superman, there's something that ties into all this character stuff, and that's to think about your character alignments.
Mhm.
And if you're in the gaming world, you know about like chaotic and neutral and good and all this stuff. And so like Superman is lawful good, and like Batman is chaotic good, and Homelander is chaotic evil, like definitely, and it's just, and so if you take the model of that character, you can actually pull them in, and then you're getting the core, the essence of who they are in your story. And then what happens is when you take that character who's got and you're playing with that essence, and you've got that, once they're starting to live in your world, they're going to change based on that world too. They're going to change based on that adventure that they're in as well. So we're going to hold off to questions until the end, but I promise we're going to have lots of time for questions. But let's talk about, I want to take this beyond just a character now. So let's talk about, because we've talked about the world at large, and we've talked about fan fiction, we've talked about genre, so there's elements within a story. So we've got character. What about if you want to, like Rob, borrow a setting or a line of dialogue? Again, we make our living writing, so we are not pro plagiarism, I promise you. But there are times that you're like, I want that line, or I want that exact image. So how do you take those things and make them your own? So look beyond the character. Is there ever anything that you have seen that you've used in one of your stories? Either a line of dialogue or a visual that your characters experience, or a sound, or even just the way something is described. Is there something that maybe you've used, you're nodding, so I'm gonna let you start, Dennis, that you've used in your book and then made it your own in your own world?
Yeah, and this is a direct ripoff, so this isn't like reading my work, but in Cold World, so it's about spirituality, and me personally, I'm not a religious person, but I'm also not an atheist. And so in this book, there are two extreme factions. There are these extremely religious people, and there's these extremely non-religious people. But he's in the middle, and so he's trying to describe how he feels about the universe towards the end. And this takes place 200 years in the future, so he asks his friend, hey, do you remember that old story, Star Wars? So it's actually brought up in the book, straight up, and so he starts describing like how the Force is described, and he said that's kind of how I feel about the universe. And so that is directly in the book. Again, it's George Lucas. George Lucas, if you're watching this, it's out of love, man. I love your world. But yeah, so that's a direct ripoff. But I think it's done in a way to where hopefully it's not like super corny, and it's more of like it just makes you kind of feel warm, especially if you're a Star Wars fan. Just someone using fandom to describe how they feel about something. That was the intent.
I think that's a realistic commercial reference,
Yeah.
something that's gonna be known still,
Yeah.
that far in the future.
Yeah.
So, what about you, Justin? Do you have anything that you've like adopted from another world and brought it into your own?
Sure. Two examples, one that make me look bad, one to counter that. So I also am guilty of stealing off George Lucas a little bit, because there is a scene in history where Louis XVI was ranting against the other governing bodies in France, and felt his authority as king was being questioned, and he yelled, "I am the state." And it was one of his most famous quotes, and I love that line, and I love it from history class. I was like, I want to use that. I want to adapt that and show the corrupting power of being an authority figure, turning a leader into a tyrant. And so one of my characters yells, "I am the Elkanah," which is the name of their ruling social structure, basically, not quite empire, but similar. And so he yells that line out, and I thought it was a great line, I liked it, but then I realized, wait, that's straight out of Star Wars when Palpatine says, "I am the Senate." They probably got it from Louis XVI as well. And then since then I've also seen it in I think like 2 other shows that also ripped off that exact same line, so I feel pretty bad about it.
Okay, but what's your one that makes
So
you
the
look
better
really good then?
example would be like the Christian doctrine of Gnosticism from like early apostate. There's like an early apostate version of the church in Greece believed in this system of thought called Gnosticism, where like the spirit is holy and the flesh is corrupt. So like the spirit cannot create corrupt flesh. So you have like a high spirit that creates a low spirit that creates a low spirit. And that's like this gradual degradation until finally some really lousy angel is able to create us poor mortals. And so like when I was doing my system of creation, I kind of adopted the idea of Gnosticism, where I have, you know, a higher God who creates lower gods that then become gradually corrupted over time until they create corrupted fleshly creatures.
Mhm.
So yeah.
So I would say for me it's mostly dialogue. Like you were saying that I am the state. You know, but what I try to do is I try to like, just like we talked about with characters, capturing the essence of the character. I try to capture the essence of a line of dialogue. I'm like, you know, if it's like, ooh, I just love the way that that is said, I will take it and I'll literally write it out and I'll be like, okay, what's the tone that's being said here? This is sarcastic. One of the lines that I have, one of my old publishers, he actually says, he goes, oh, I'm not going to say the city because somebody might know it, but I'm just going to call it Acme. I'm from Acme, Illinois. And they said, biggest meth capital in the state. It's a great place to be from. And it was like, it was the sweetest freaking line of dialogue. I was like, but there was so much packed in there. It was like, it was sarcastic, and it was like the tone of the way he said from. And like, I have taken and, you know, make myself look bad here like you did, Justin. I think I've used that line of dialogue in like 4 different books, but it's never the same line, but like just the essence of like the sarcasm and the flip and like the tone of how it was delivered and the slightly like dark wit and so that's how I like steal like dialogue is I, you know, much like, you know, you were saying with characters. Yeah, exactly. Yes. So, or if it's traceable, I just want it to like sell more books for me. So come after me in such a way that people feel sad for me and they buy all my books.
It's George Lucas. Your work is in this book. So, want to send me a lawsuit? Really make some stink about
There
it?
you go. There you go. We'll go fund me him. Okay, so let's see what else I had here. So are there worlds that you find that you keep returning to get inspired to create your own worlds?
I mean, I read a lot of comics. So that's probably why I keep making comic books. And then I have 3 books on dreams, so clearly I keep returning to dreams. But what's really cool is that like my books on dreams aren't inspired by any like pop culture dream works. So like I didn't even read Sandman until after I finished the book. And I was reading it and I was like, thank God I did not read this because it would have influenced everything I did. So I'm glad that they were separated. So yeah, when I write about dreams though, it's like my dreams or like people I know, their dreams, or I go on the internet and see what common dreams are. I'm like, oh, everyone has dreams with their teeth fall and they're naked at school. Okay, cool. So that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I guess dreams and comics I keep going back to. And then Star Wars, like I said. I'm not really like a fancy person, but like pop culture sci-fi.
What about you, Justin?
I'm not coming up with any that I return to again and again. Possibly Lord of the Rings. I've always loved that.
Yeah.
I've always loved that world. Silmarillion also. So.
Huh. Very cool. Very cool. Is there anything that you guys would like to read at all from one of your books? Like a little piece of scenery that was maybe, you know, kind of either it is injected multi-genre. In other words, like it's maybe a fantasy scene that has like something that's a little bit more sciencey, or it's a graphic novel panel that has something that's a little bit deeper, or whatever it is that you would like to.
What are you sharing?
What am I sharing?
No, what are you sharing?
Oh.
Are you sharing?
Like, oh no.
I just have to remind you real quick, you also write books. You remember this, right? You remember that you write books as well? You're allowed to share.
I can share also. I'll share like a little something. So I spent a lot of years in sports writing, and I still really enjoy sports. It's something that I have a lot of fun creating. It's high action, and you know, I'm a sucker for a good sports movie, you know, all of that stuff. So when I created young adult fantasy, this one's actually about a quadriplegic boy who dreams of playing baseball when he sleeps, and so I was able to infuse like great sports scenes into what would otherwise be like a fantasy book. So I'll just do like a couple paragraphs here. So Cooper was having the game of his life. By the 3rd inning, he had caught 3 flies that came his way out there in deep left field. He had assisted on 2 double plays by the bottom of the 4th, and in the top of the 5th, he batted in the run that put his team, the Washington Wonder Boys, up by 1. Victory hung like a cold glass of lemonade out of reach in the perfect 70-degree air that flowed in gentle breezes, carrying the scent of hot dogs and popcorn over the Little League field. They wanted it, they could see it, feel it, taste it, but not reach it. Not yet. The sun shone warmly down on the back of the young Wonder Boy's neck. Cooper's dad, burnt from the week spent watching his son play ball, paced back and forth in front of the silver metal bench style bleachers. They were full to capacity and lined up as deep as a stadium behind the chain link fence that separated the spectators from the Little League pride of Western Washington State. Everybody in the community had come out to show their support. I'm gonna skip ahead. There's a last pitch. And it gets hit. Cooper braced his knees. He was at the ready in a half squat with his arms loose. He swallowed hard. His saliva was thin, warm, and salty, and the gulp only added to the butterflies in his stomach. He knew that Matt's fastball was the best in the league, but Cooper felt like an eternity passed in that moment after the pitch left his friend's hand. He prepared himself to push off into a run as he heard the crack of the bat against the ball echo in his ears. Time stood still. He was sure the crowd must be roaring, but in his world, Cooper's only focus was on the ball coming toward him. He imagined hearing the whir of it buzzing through the air. The space around the white sphere became blurry, and the ball itself seemed to grow larger as it neared. And I won't go on. But basically, I was able to take my love of sports, and then I put in all of like this, there's like slow motion, and there's kind of like some buzzy, fantastical words that go throughout. And so it's a little bit of a fusion of taking like a genre that I loved and I wasn't quite ready to let go of, and pull it into like some of the genre fiction that I was then working on. So that's kind of there. I shared. I write books.
What's
too.
so great? Can we just point this out? I was like, you shared. And you're like, what? And she opens the book to the perfect page, and she's like, so anyway, and you know exactly what to do. You
I
knew
really
exactly.
did. This is like the one. So, but anyway, okay. All right, Justin. It looks like you maybe found something.
Sure. I mean, this is sort of along the lines. It's I open each book with a passage that's written in a very distinctly different style from the rest of the book, and it's a section on the mythology behind the world. So whereas most of it's written as a very in the moment, very present narrative, I open each one with a little backstory, kind of fleshing out the nature of the gods behind the world. So I'll read that. It's kind of written in more of what you'd expect from like an older religious text or something. Of a time there was no flesh, only Phaedra and the void, order and chaos, light and dark, structure and potential. No other powers stirred between them, no other thought pierced the nothing, only theirs. They danced a dance, perhaps ordained, perhaps foreseen, and they spun through timelessness without sun or moon to measure what passed, until, in a moment both infinite and fleeting, a feeling rose in Phaedra's breast. Loneliness, void and self were not enough. So he made matter and time through which it moved. From his being he drew forth life and scattered it in the potential of the void, in whatever was not himself. He became finite, that potential life might be infinite. The beings he created he called the passions, and each represented an element of himself. Each was patterned on attributes his own. He loved them and made for them worlds, little mountains of earth and water on which they might freely roam. And as they roamed and created, as they became what they would be, they met the others, the forces. The meetings were shocking at first, a revelation to challenge being, for the passions had thought themselves alone. And yet the forces were no younger than themselves, no newer to the world made of the void. Many were the names of the forces, chance and time, riot and music, and hundreds more. And each force governed a small realm in the created worlds, ordered the progression and laws of a certain system. Each was to creation into the void what the passions were to Phaedra, the embodiments of attributes. So,
Awesome.
anyway.
Thank you. I can hear your love of poetry in that too, like because you talked about a lot about that in the other one. And okay, you know what you need to read, Dennis? You need to read one of the dialogue scenes, the play scenes.
Was that to play some characters?
Yes.
No, I'll read some of the information scene. So basically what I did to talk about the world, the cold world, is it's on the 80th anniversary of when the asteroid hit Earth that made it into winter year-round, and they're watching a news story about it. So they're kind of describing what the world's like, and hopefully in a natural way, but it's just a lot of information. All right, so as our viewers know, she continued, she being the news reporter, it has been 80 years today since Australia was impacted by a large asteroid known as Velos. That day changed our existence as we knew it. Through a chain reaction of subsequent events, Earth was plunged into a permanent winter. By this time, most of humanity had already left Earth for the other places we had colonized, largely thanks to the Knights of Christianity and their billionaire prophet, Jonah Mesh. We had developed homes on several moons, Mars, and an uninhabited Earth-like planet previously known as Proxima B, which we now know as Flora. That's a real place. So I was using science. We realized the potential of Flora as a livable habitat through the use of laser-propelled light sails that had been sent to Alpha Centauri decades prior. Also real stuff. They really make light sails. It wasn't until we were able to develop and utilize wormhole technology that even traveling there would be a possibility. Large ships and smaller shuttles, thanks to the continued generosity of groups like the Knights, now travel there and back on a regular basis. And so now here you're starting to get an idea of what this world is like. So you have these really rich Knights of Christianity who have developed the universe as we know it, and we know now that Earth is just winter year round, and so we're just kind of living this. And later on in the book, you meet the opposite of them, called the neo-atheists. And if you run into a gang of them, they look at you and they ask you, do you believe in God? And if you say yes, they'll kill you on the spot. And so you have these two very extreme groups, and our main character, Caliph, is just in between. He's trying to figure out how to survive in between.
So you said it wasn't great, but you also had like a news report.
Yeah,
in the midst of that. So
I feel like it's a
still
cheat a
is
little
like-
bit, but
It is a cheat
but there's
because
a lot of
like we all
information.
use it, but it's a cheat that works.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's a reason that they have those elements in a lot of the streaming television. They're like, we got to give you a whole bunch of information at once. What are one of the ways that we can do it? And I think being genre bending authors, you know, I think that all of those tools are at your disposal. And so that's kind of like, as we're gonna get into some Q&A now, that's kind of where this all lands, is that whether you're playing in other worlds or you're building worlds that you want other people to play in, or you're mixing those genres, it's kind of a free-for-all in today's independent, you know, writing world, or even traditional writing world, some of the biggest stuff out there. So like, the rules exist for just create well. You know, and if that means that you're gonna blend your game master abilities into your stories, or if that means that you're gonna blend other things. Did you wanna ask your question really quick before you go?
No.
Okay, I'm so sorry that
No,
we
it's all
didn't get
good.
to it, but are there other Q&A right now? Because we've got a few minutes left. Go ahead.
I just want to mention that the lore in like certain video games is really amazing. That's all I'm gonna say.
Can you say it one more time? I'm so
The
sorry.
lore in certain video games is amazing. I'll just leave it at that.
Absolutely, you know, it is, and that's why a lot of video games like are becoming movies, you know, a lot of them. So, what other questions, Q&A at all? How about a little ask us anything? Doesn't have to be about the playing in other worlds.
Oh, I didn't sign up for this.
Are you a plotter or a pantser?
I'm a mix. For those who haven't heard those terms, so like pantser means like by the seat of your pants, no plan, you're just like writing and going. And then plotter is obviously like really diagrams. So I plot out my main points, and I know where the story's going. But then in writing it, I'm like a pantser. I'm like writing this, and I call them my crack the egg moments, where it's like, oh, this thing happened. I'm like, oh, no, this, and I'll go and I'll write all those things. It doesn't matter if it's in order. So I'm both. I start out as a plotter, and then in creating the story, I'm a pantser. But
I'm a recovering pantser. Like the first several books I wrote.
What did you do to your pants?
The first several books I wrote, I was fairly free with. Like I had usually like a second document at the end, and I just had like a bunch of notes on it. But I was mostly just writing as it came, and then just relying on very scattered notes to kind of go by. But the project I'm working on now is vastly larger than anything I've done before, and there's several different POVs, there's several different plot lines, there's several different locations that everything's going on at, and I'm realizing very quickly that I have set myself up for failure because I have about 140,000 words written and no narrative structure to weave them all back together down the road. So I've just made a horrible problem for myself by taking the pantser approach. So I would preach plot and practice pants.
I mentioned I did a writing class earlier this week, and one of the sections was on planning or doing. And I always recommend to people, if you're one and you're stuck, try the other. For me, I kind of do both. My only hard rule when I'm writing is I need to know the end. I need to know how a story ends, and then I can write towards that. I tell people, if you're running a marathon, if you didn't know where the finish line was, you probably wouldn't finish running it. And so for me, I have to have the ending. But some books, I'm very much like a plotter. Cold World, I knew it was 19 chapters. I outlined every single one. I wrote a chapter a day, and I finished it in 19 days. And so that's like the most like plotting I've ever done.
yeah, That's intense.
But like Thea, I knew how it ended. I got to the ending and I realized, oh shit, this is the middle. And so then I had to think of the actual ending. But the thing is, once I got to the middle, I knew the characters so well, I knew the story I was telling, that as soon as I got to the middle and I knew what's the middle, I was like, I know how that ends. And so I was very easily, I finished Thea in a week. And so that was the fastest I've ever written a book. And then a week later, after going through it a couple times, I released it. And so 2 weeks after I started writing it, it was out in the world. But it was a story I've been thinking about for a long time. Most of my books are. So by the time I sit down, I'm just like ready to go. And so I work really fast.
How
but-
can you do that?
I work really fast, but I think about things for a really long time before I put them out there.
Very cool. Any other questions?
So my question is, so there's a thing there's like AI generated art, not just script, not just books, but like pictures, and I want to know how that plays in with like plagiarism and whatnot.
Whew, that is what the courts are trying to figure out. And at 7 o'clock tonight, we are talking about AI in our world.
All right,
So definitely come on back for that.
All right.
It's, I think, I will tell you, for me personally, I don't think that AI can write as well as I can.
Right.
And so
Okay.
I figure it's just another competitor in the field, and one that I will just have to,
Okay.
work against. I
Right.
prefer to generate my stories in the human way. I think that there are really good uses for AI though, and you have to find the way that you can do that in a moral and ethical way.
Mhm.
And what do you guys think? He
I
opened
did, I
a
did
big
not, I did
can
not
of
sign
worms.
up for that panel specifically because my opinions on it are gonna be a lot harsher than that. I view it as an abomination, basically.
I'm actually made up of AI, so I love it. I'm just a walking AI, so.
Just
Okay.
like
Actually,
that's how
if
you
you-
finish
Just-
it.
yeah, just
That's
live
how
in the
you
world.
finish a book.
If you
Yes.
follow Dennis's socials, when about a year ago now, a little less than a year ago, but it was like maybe end of last year, he had a wonderful blog that he put out on AI that I still reference when people are asking about it, that really kind of touch on some of the moral implications, and it has come so far since then, that it's a conversation that's changing every day. But I encourage you to join us at 7 o'clock, when another author and I, who don't necessarily agree on all of it, are gonna sit in front of you guys and tell you what we think about AI. So definitely come check that out. So one of the things I want to remind you is that everybody who attends these writing track panels this weekend can get all of the videos for free from all 6, even if you just come to one. All you gotta do is come up and scan that little QR code and sign that way you can get it sent to your email. You'll get the videos from all 6 tracks, regardless of which ones you came. And remember that our writers are giving up time on the floor when they come and teach this, so remind them where they can find you.
I'm at D16, right in the writer's artist alley. So if you walk in, I'm right next to the aisle.
E4. So.
And I'm not at a table this weekend, so you'll just catch me in here or catch me online at redwritesbooks.com. And so thank you guys so much, and be sure to check out the remaining writers track panels.